Greetings, Kirk Matushik here from the Fallon in Simpson, Pennsylvania. I've been doing a series of webinars about media manipulation. As a student of communication, I'm finding that it's actually our mainstream or our so-called legitimate news sources that are the primary providers of fake news. On a prior seminar, I demonstrated how CNN uses the techniques of Nazi propaganda expert Joseph Goebbels to shape and control public opinion. Today I'm going to be doing a webinar on a language technique used in misinformation called conflation. So my objectives today are to explain what conflation is, identify the demographics of the people who would use conflation, and show it how it is employed in the undocumented immigrant argument, and also show how it's employed in the status quo legal immigration argument. So, conflation, what is it? Conflation occurs when concepts sharing some characteristics are treated as one identity and the differences become lost. In logic, it's the practice of treating two distinct concepts or more as if they were one. This produces errors and misunderstandings and obscures or hides the differences among the concepts. In other words, the people that are using this technique don't want you to think about the differences, and they're trying to lead you to believe a certain thing. I'm going to read a couple of titles, and I'm going to see if you can catch on what's going on here. This is from PBS NewsHour. Fact check. Immigration does not bring crime into the U.S. Data say. The Washington Post. Just a title, Immigration and Crime. This from the New York Daily News. Immigrant students in New York City graduate at a higher rate than those born in the U.S. A report from the Independent Budget Office finds. Now, if you don't see anything wrong with this, then slap yourself in the face, because you are been brainwashed by the mainstream media. All three of these are guilty of conflation. They're not telling us, for example, are we talking about legal immigrants into the United States, or are we talking about illegal immigrants? So let's look at the demographics of why these major sources would use conflation. And I've tried to describe what the characteristics of who would use this technique are. So I've listed pro, anti-diversity, illegal immigrant advocate demographics include most of your news and entertainment media, Hollywood liberals, college professors, progressive Democrats. Progressive Democrats you would describe as the smartest people in the room that share the characteristics of they can't teach anybody how to do anything. An example would be Paul Krugman, who is a Nobel Prize-winning economist. He can't teach a single person how to get a job more than minimum wage. And they all have major access to the media, or they are the media. They are the New York Times. They are the Washington Post. So why would you use a misinformation technique in order to explain your argument? And based on the concept of common sense, and you can get one of these common sense beanies down at the Fallon at $30, tremendous value. The reason why you would use misinformation in an argument is because you don't have an argument. So let's take the argument for illegal immigration or undocumented immigrants. According to Gallup poll, there's 150 million people across the world who would move here permanently. And according to immigration services, if you're in an unskilled labor category, you might have to wait up to 24 years to get your shot at coming to the United States because of the overwhelming demand of people wanting to get here. There's about 8 million undocumented workers. So with 150 million on deck that want to come here, we don't need a single illegal immigrant in terms of work. We would just have to expand our legal immigration efforts. In terms of fairness or diversity, the conflators say, well, we're going to stay with this immigration because it makes us more diverse. The change in our immigration categories happened in 1965 with a Ted Kennedy sponsored law called the Hart-Celler Act. That moved us away from a multicultural, diverse immigrant category to one that now has de facto benefited Mexico. One country, one ethnic group, one language. They, in terms of the undocumented people, they have half of the entire undocumented population, or about 6 million. And this dwarfs most legal in most countries across the world that are sending us immigrants. Laos, for example, one of the poorest countries in Asia, and one that were a recipient of a lot of our bombs during the Vietnam era. They can't use a lot of their land because the bombs are still there, and their citizens get killed and maimed by these things. So there's an argument to be made to help Laos out. They have about 250,000 Laotians who are living in the United States. This compares to over 6 million undocumented Mexican immigrants. Now, in terms of the legal immigration, we get the most immigrants from which country? Mexico. In 2014, that was 134,000, and it actually went up to 154,000 in 2015. The next closest country was China with 75,000. In other words, not even half the amount of immigrants that Mexico gets. So you can't make a fairness argument by saying it's fair to allow one country to dominate in terms of these highly sought after immigration spots. You can't make a diversity argument when it comes to we become a more diverse nation by allowing one country to dominate in the immigration spots. So let's go to the economic argument. And actually, there's some clues. If you read these stories and actually read them with a critical thought, they all actually give you information that they don't want to give you because they're trying to steer you a different way. But this is trying to show that the status quo immigration is working out just fine. But then when you read it, statistically, according to this, in New York City high schools, immigrant students graduate at a slightly higher rate. And it gives you the rate. That's about a percentage point higher. But then it goes on to say, except for one category, which would be the Mexican immigrants, had the lowest rate, which is a graduation rate of 43%. And it's about 23% lower than the graduate rate of the other students. In other words, the title should read, Dominant Immigrant Category in the United States, Struggling Academically, Risk Factors for Future Social Hardships, which would be crime and poverty. In fact, the studies do show that educational attainment are risk factors for those things. So, in conclusion, conflation is mixing together topics that share some characteristics but have differences, and talking about them as if you're talking about one thing. So why do people in this category, which would be most of your news and entertainment media, your Hollywood liberals, your college professors, use misinformation when they have access or are the media, is because they don't have an argument, a valid argument to make. The status quo immigration, which is favoring one country, is anti-diverse. It's not fair, and it's not economically showing that it's working well. If you follow the group that's benefiting the most and look at educational levels and then look at future generations' risk factor for crime and poverty, you're finding out that it's creating a social cost. In fact, the National Academy of Sciences of Engineering Medicine, which is one of the foremost researcher group, did a report in 2016 over a 7 to 5 year period. They found that the impact to the middle class in terms of expense is a negative when you factor in the cost of education. If you have higher incarceration rates, again, that's a cost that goes onto the middle class. So it is a net negative for the state and local level. which you could arrive at by common sense, but it is in fact documented. So in conclusion, conflation is mixing together concepts that share certain characteristics and talking about them as they're talking about the same thing, and it is used by your mainstream people because they don't have a valid argument to make. And that concludes our session today, and stay tuned for further education on media manipulation. Thank you very much.